Hey everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. I'm very excited about tonight. First off, I want to say that I'm excited about what's going on in the news. We've got Dr. Rachel Levine has been, not sure if it's Levine or Levine, I need to look that up, was nominated by Joe Biden to be Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary, which is super exciting. He's already put out an executive order reversing the transgender ban in the military. So that's another really exciting thing. Very, very happy that that's going on. And we've got some really good news going on for the community, publicly, politically. It's awesome. My guest tonight is Jamie. Jamie is an ex-Navy. She's ex-Navy. She's she's pretty much as tough as she is beautiful, and as nerdy as she is fun and sweet. I'm excited to have her on tonight. So please, everybody, welcome Jamie.
Hey,
Hi, welcome into the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. Doing really well. Like I said, we've got some really good news going on out there. So a
Yeah,
lot to
definitely.
celebrate right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of good news, especially the repeal of the trans-military ban.
hmm Yeah, that's something that I'm sure is very, very close to your heart. Is that something that's directly impacted some of your friends, people that you still know in the military?
Yeah, most of the people that I knew in the military were able to get waivers to stay in, but the uncertainty of it all was always in the air, whether the next command they went to, whether it was going to be okay for them to stay in or not. So this is a nice step, basically cementing their future in the military.
Do you know? So you know some people that are active in there. Do you know if they've had anything once the ban went in place? You said they were able to get some waivers to stay in, but did that change the mood for them? Did they find any more or greater
I
discrimination
think
or
it
any
was
kind of bad treatment?
as far as I know, they didn't have any discrimination or bad treatment, but it was just kind of the uncertainty of it all.
hmm
Because a lot of the people that I still know, they're career sailors. I mean, they're wanting to stay in for 20 years, 30 years, and a lot of them are getting close to that mark, and they don't want to basically lose all the time that they'd already put in,
Yeah.
which would happen if you just weren't allowed to reenlist or if you were kicked out for whatever reason.
Well, yeah, and I know that the most important thing in the military is chain of command and the support that you get from them. So having the top of your chain of command basically trying to eliminate your existence there and your right in the military, that's got to be a really tough thing to struggle through.
It is. I can imagine. I got out right before the ban went into place, so I didn't don't really have a whole lot of firsthand experience myself with it.
hmm
But like I said, I still know the people, and for the vast majority of them, they were able to serve through the whole ban. But it was really left up to their command's discretion. So if they were in a position to where I don't know, the commander decided that their medical needs would be too great for a deployment or whatnot, their their future could have been uncertain. But as far as I know, they were all able to stay in without any real issues.
That's great. Yeah, it being on the outside, we didn't really know. You just hear ban, and it just seems like black and white. That's it. You're outdone. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to hear that they at least had that waiver program.
Mm-hmm. I think it was. I think a lot of it was a little overblown with the ban, but still, it's that whole uncertainty. Just it kind of it doesn't make you. It makes you fear for your future a lot of times, which I'm
hmm
glad that's over with.
Yeah, I think that is a common theme of the last administration. Just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of strong words that you didn't really know what they meant or how they would really play out. But there was a lot
Mm-hmm.
of fear because of that uncertainty from that.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, Julie said COC's chain of command, and Logos Taco commented again that Jamie equals nerd. I can't wait to get into that portion of the show later on because
So my reputation precedes me.
yes, on top of her military experience and the wonderful things we'll get into her in her story, she's also a big Star Wars and gaming nerd. So there'll be plenty for us to talk about. We'll try not to get too too derailed with that. Let's go ahead and get into your story here. I like to start with your history and kind of basically with your childhood. When you were younger, what were some of the signs for you that either you knew at the time or you're able to trace back that you were different from the gender that you were born to?
So I don't really know if I remember the exact moment that I realized, but if I'm looking back, I was probably around 7 or 8 years old, is what I would imagine, and it probably is pretty typical for a lot of trans women. I liked trying on my sister's clothes. I liked trying on my mother's clothes, stuff like that. And it was, I guess I always thought that I was just like, maybe a cross dresser or something.
Mm-hmm.
But, nobody ever really explained to me the differences of a cross dresser and a trans person, because the word trans wasn't even a real a real term then anyway, or at least not a term that I was privy to.
Uh-huh.
But I think probably I've kind of realized it around 7 or 8 years old. I just
Okay.
didn't have the terminology to know what it was. I just knew I was different.
And so how did that develop for you? When did you realize that you were trans, and what was that kind of time like in between there? Were you able to express that much, or was it something you had to hide?
It was something I hid very extensively up until I was probably in my mid 20s to late 20s. As we talked about the military, I joined the military kind of to maybe stamp out those feelings. Maybe it would make a man out of me, etc. And
Uh-huh.
just I guess it didn't work. But but no, I mean I didn't. I hid it very very well. Nobody ever knew. I was never caught with any clothes or nothing like that.
Uh-huh.
But when I was around 25 or 30 is when it started really rearing its head, to where my partners would find out about it and I would tell them and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And what made you decide to come out as trans? What, as they say in the community, cracked your egg there?
Well, we kind of talked about, or I kind of talked about my relationships. Every relationship that I'd ever had up until I was around 30 years old always seemed to fail for essentially the same reason. I would go through the cycle of everything's really great in the beginning, but then I would start getting depressed, and the depression would get worse and worse, and then the person would, it would affect the relationship a lot, to where that person would want to leave me because I was becoming more of a roommate to them than I would be, a partner.
Uh-huh.
And none of them were ever, really bad breakups, but just, I mean, they weren't good relationships either. So after the not the last relationship, but the relationship before I came out, that's when I finally decided, okay, this is enough. I've done this to 6 or 7 women already. I can't keep doing this to them or to me. So I'm gonna have to figure this out and do something about it now. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all very common, having to hide it, and then having it, you don't understand why, but it's affecting your relationships and then causing their demise.
Mm-hmm.
It's great that you're able to finally come out. Let's see what is let me see what Julie says here. Oh, going back to military just real quick. What because I didn't have it. I was telling Julie before the show, or yeah, Jamie before the show, that I had conflated. I was just like, I thought you were in the special forces somehow, and for some reason I thought it was Ranger, but I know
No.
that's not Navy. So, Julie asked what rank you were.
What rank? I was a petty officer first class, or an E6.
Okay. So did you go for that? Is it with the officer in the title? Did you go through officer training?
Nope. So in the Navy and Coast Guard, their ranks are a little different than
Mm-mm.
the Marines, Army, and Air Force. A petty officer is essentially, you know, as degrading of a term as it is, it's a petty officer. So I mean, you're still an enlisted person, but from E4 through E7 is still either a petty officer or a chief petty officer, senior chief petty officer, master chief petty officer. It's just the Navy terminology, but it's still enlisted.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that. What I've learned from military ranks, I learned from watching Band of Brothers. There's the extent
So
of my knowledge.
E6 is basically the same thing as like a staff sergeant would be in the Army.
Okay. So you mentioned that, it was this underlying issue that was affecting your relationships. Did you seek out therapy in at that time, and have you seen therapy since, and how has it helped you?
I didn't seek out therapy for that particular uh, thing, not the relationship anyway. I did seek out therapy because I knew I was going to need a therapist later, essentially, to start. HRT eventually.
Mhm.
So I started to go to a couple of therapists local to North Alabama, and surprised, none of them had any idea what to do with a trans person that was wanting to start HRT. Most of them were very willing to work with me, but they really didn't have an idea where to start.
Wow. So
I
being a
eventually found. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
you're a trailblazer in your local area. Wow.
Apparently,
Hmm.
I didn't really feel that I needed therapy because for myself, I knew what I needed to do. I knew who I was and what I was, but it was just kind of that hurdle that I needed to jump as far as the gatekeeping goes. I
Okay.
eventually found, a provider that would provide me all my prescriptions on the informed consent model. So after I, got all that, I stopped going to therapy.
Hmm. So
And
once you got out of that relationship, the last one, you knew what you needed to do and how you needed to move forward.
I did,
Hmm.
because it had been building up in me for so many years anyway. And I was always on the internet researching what I needed to do, even,
Hmm.
while I was with this person.
Did you have any question in starting that? Which of the procedures, which of the steps that you would go through, or did you have a plan from the beginning, from what you read?
I had no plan at all at the beginning. I just knew I needed to do something. I knew that what I was doing wasn't working, obviously, so I needed to find a new path forward. And eventually, that turned into HRT being the very first step I took.
Hmm. So let's get into coming out. Who did you come out to first?
I came out to one of my younger sisters first. It was on Christmas Eve of 2014 is when I came out to her. And I came out to her because I knew for 100% fact that she was going to be supportive of me.
Mm-hmm.
I had no doubt in my mind that she was going to welcome it and that she would love me no matter what. But it's still I was still nervous to do it, even though
Mm-hmm.
I knew what the outcome would be. And her outcome was exactly what I expected it to be.
What was it
But
about her that suggested to you that that gave you that confidence to know that 100% she would support you?
I know her very well. She's always been very supportive of like gay rights, trans rights, and whatnot. I just kind of knew. I've known her for 30 years anyway, so I felt like I knew how she was going to react.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple days later, I told my other sister, and then a week or two after that, my dad was told, and we moved on from there.
Mm-hmm. And how
It
did that all
started.
go with the rest of your family?
Everybody went. It went really well. Most of my family, like the outlying family, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., were kind of told without my knowledge, which really upset me at the time.
Okay.
But they were all supportive.
All right.
I was
Yeah.
still just kind of, mad that they were told without me knowing about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that, and that's definitely a bummer. But it's nice that it worked out.
Yeah, it made it a lot quicker for me. I
As I
didn't have
say,
to fret over it.
yeah, saved you some time.
It's like, oh, by the way, everybody knows already. I'm like, oh, great.
All right, moving on. How was your acceptance? You were in the military at this time, then, right?
No, I was in the reserves, but I was in my way out of the reserves at this time. So I did 11 years active duty, and I did 4 years of the reserves. And this was towards the very end of my reserve time because I just didn't really enjoy the reserves very much, to be honest.
Hmm.
So this was at the end of it. I never had to come out to the military.
Okay, that makes it easy.
I mean, I was still on HRT while I was in the last couple of months of the military, but that nobody really knew.
Hmm. Did you have any fear then that something would get discovered, or were you pretty sure that?
No, not really. I mean, I knew I was getting out soon anyway, so it wasn't a big deal to me.
Okay. And then did you go straight into another job after that?
I did. Since I was in the reserves is only really, the 1 week in the month, 2 weeks a year.
Mm-hmm.
I was already working at my current job then. So that was my Monday through Friday job. And then one weekend I would go to a Navy Reserve Center and do all that.
And what was their level of acceptance there?
At the job I'm at right now,
Yeah.
none at all. I started dressing a little more androgynously at work because when I started there, I kind of looked one way. I had the short military crew cut. I had a full beard most of the time, and then when I flipped and started, the hair started getting longer. The beard was going away. The ears are pierced, getting smaller, getting thinner, and whatnot. They kind of knew I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
hiding it. I knew people. I knew people were finding out. I knew everything, but eventually I just went to my HR department and I kind of told them, what I was doing, and the HR manager looked me in the eye and she kind of said, "Yeah, we know, Jamie. It's not a big secret." And I said, "I know. I mean, I just still have to tell you to make it official so I can start getting all the paperwork changed and whatnot." So it was kind of a similar situation with the HR department and my sister. I knew everything was going to be cool, but it was still just kind of nerve wracking actually doing it.
Mm-hmm. And did that kind of gradual change make it easy for you, or in
I think it did.
retrospect, did it build some of that nervousness a little bit?
I think it did. I don't know if I could have flipped the switch and did a 180 in one day. I don't know if I would have been able to handle that. So the gradualness was my way of doing it, and it worked out well for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another good way of handling it. Like you said, with coming out to somebody, it's really important to find that person that you know really well and that supports you completely. To target the ones that you're really sure of and start there. Build up your support network and then go from there, and take it at your pace.
Exactly.
I did sort of the same thing at work. I started wearing some more kind of mm, I wasn't wearing androgynous clothes. I was wearing women's clothes, but that could pass, and in
Yeah.
sizes that were large enough to where they look like guy clothes. But I was like doing a little bit of makeup, like you said. I added the
Mhm.
ear piercing and stuff like that, and I had some friends that saw and called me out on it and supported. And so I'm like, okay, I think this can work. And then yeah, I
Mhm.
just kind of gradually built from there. And then it was kind of a combination. I eventually did just kind of a band-aid 180 thing where it's just like, here you go. Showed up to work in a skirt. But I did have that same kind of like slow, subtle build up to gain that confidence to do it.
Yeah, it definitely worked out well for me. And besides the HR department on that day that I told them those years ago,
Mm.
I still haven't, officially came out at work. So I'm not sure if anybody really knows or not. That was just my attempt at a bad joke. But
Okay. Good, good, good. Because I'm
no,
like,
there's never been like a meeting to, basically tell everybody, "Hey, this is Jamie now." Nothing like that. None of that was ever done at my work. I just kind of went to HR and then
hmm.
went back to work.
Did you have anybody that gave you a second look at
Yeah,
work?
I mean, there's people that do, and it's been quite a while, but I mean, I don't let any of that bother me. I
Hmm.
didn't really let it bother me then either, because I
It's,
knew the company had my back. So
hmm. You must get that from your Navy toughness. That must be where that
I
comes
don't
from.
know. I like to joke that I have pretty thick skin. I mean, it's really tough to get me worked up.
Hmm. Did you have that before you joined the military, or was that something that you gained there?
It's probably something that I built there,
Hmm.
because I don't think I was like that as a child, but the military probably helped.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. So it seems like it kind of went well for you everywhere. Did you have any areas in your life where it didn't go so well? Where you kind of either felt nervous or unsupported or scared?
In my life, I would say no. There's been random little situations like at the driver's license office and stuff like that I've had bad experiences with them, but nothing super super bad.
Hmm. Has the community, you mentioned when you went to see a therapist that you were sort of blazing a trail there. They didn't have a lot of experience with that. Has the community kind of evolved around you a little bit? Do you see more trans people? Do you see more trans acceptance and services? Or is it still kind of hunting and pecking trying to find that?
Oh, there's tons of trans services in the North Alabama area now. There's lots of therapists. There's several different choices for somebody who's wanting to find a primary care doctor, or somebody to just do hormone therapy. There's a lot of it around, and there's plenty of therapists that are specialized in it. Well, not specialized in it, but they, that's part of their practice. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of resources around.
What is your level of involvement in the trans community in your area?
It's not super. I don't have a super high level of you know commitment with the community. We were meeting once a week or so. A good majority of the group would meet for dinner once a week, but
Oh,
that kind of that got put on hold since COVID happened, so I haven't
Yeah.
seen a lot of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was
We
your
have a
first?
whole other Discord server where we're all on. So I mean, it's nice that I get to see some of their glow up pictures. You know, I haven't seen any of them in person in almost a year now.
Mm. And
But
they're
you
all.
know, they're still transitioning. They're still doing their thing. But
Mm.
so it's nice to see that.
Yeah, and those are all people that are in your, specifically in your local area. Oh,
Yeah,
that's really cool.
there's
Great.
probably about 30 or 40 that I know fairly well in my local area.
Hmm. What was your first experience with community? When did you first find that in this whole scheme of your transition?
Uh, it would be that community that I just talked about. I kind of did everything on my own for the first several years just because I kind of thought, hey, I'm going to do this. I don't need anybody else. It was kind of one of those stubborn things inside of me. But one of the fellow trans people in the area, she kind of came across me on Facebook one day, and she was like, hey, I think I know you, but there's this big group in here in town. If you want to take part in it, you seem like you're already on your way, but if you want to take part in this, we're here just to let you know you're not the only one. So that was nice.
Yeah, that's great that they actually reached out to you. That's pretty unique. I haven't heard anything like that yet. Did you
I
have any?
think the Instagram page and everything else kind of made my presence known, possibly, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, there's this person's here in Huntsville.
Hmm. So when did you develop that presence? When did you start posting on about your transition online on Instagram?
I think I started out with Facebook several years ago. I
Okay.
made a separate Facebook profile and I explored with that a little bit, but I never really got too serious about the Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe it was Lexi Storm. She's the one that told me, "Hey, you need to go on Instagram. There's this big community on Instagram, and you should try that." And I did that about 3 or 4 years ago, and then kind of blew up since then. So she was the one that basically got me started on Instagram.
That's great.
I didn't really know it existed for the most part until then, or I thought it was for kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it's mainly for kids, but we still find a way to fit in there too.
I mean, big kids are still kids too. So
Did you have any support from anybody that you weren't expecting? Anything that was a surprise for you?
several of my military friends, I don't think I've lost a single military friend because of it. Every person that I was friends with, like good friends with in the military, every single one of them have been supportive. So that was the biggest shock to me.
Hmm.
I think it goes to speak that people really only care about the kind of person you are. It doesn't really matter what the outside looks like. So, but every single one of them are still around. I don't see them very often, obviously, because they're from all over the country, but it's
Mm.
still we're still friends on Facebook, and I still have to text them from time to time. So it's nice.
When you were starting your kind of social end of things, did you have a role model or a confidant that you could reach out to or that you looked up to?
I didn't to begin with. Like I said, it was I kind of had this little feeling in my head that I'm just going to do this all on my own. I don't really
Mm-hmm.
didn't really need anybody, and it
Hmm.
probably would have helped if I would have had somebody, but I think my stubbornness and and just me being awkward and the introvert that I typically am.
Okay.
I just I didn't really find anybody until I was already well on my way.
Hmm. Self-made. I love it. How far would you say you are along in your journey?
I mean that's a tough question because
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever really knows where the beginning or the end is. But I guess the generic answer would be that I'm probably in the middle of my journey. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it's going to end.
Have your goals for your transition shifted as you've gone along? You mentioned when you started, you just knew that HRT was probably going to be a thing, and that was kind of the first thing that you set your sights on. Did that evolve throughout the whole time, or did at some point do you develop a plan?
It's just slowly evolved throughout the time. I think if you go into transition saying that you need to do HRT, you need to do a breast augmentation, you need to do GCS, you need to do facial feminization surgery, a lot of it's overwhelming to try to list all that out, saying you got to get it all done. So I just started off with the HRT, and then I've gotten other things along the way. I don't really have any plans to do anything else, but I mean, I'm open to more stuff if I ever start feeling like I need that.
Okay. So these days, how confident do you feel as a trans woman or as a woman out in public and just in your general life?
I'm confident. I have no problem going out and being myself out in town, out at work, whatever. I mean, I am who I am at this point. There's no hiding it, and I'm me. So
Are there any things then that give you dysphoria? Does anything kind of hit you every once in a while, or give you pause from that standpoint?
uh, I don't know if I really feel any strong dysphoria, but I mean, as we're talking here, I know what my voice sounds like. I know it's a little bit deeper than most cis women's, but that's fine. The only thing that'll get to me is from time to time, like if I'm in a drive-through or on the phone or something, I'll get stirred,
Uh
which
huh.
I get it. I know what I sound like, so I don't take it personally. But that'll kind of every once in a while, one of those will sting just a little bit, but I get over it pretty quickly and then move on. It doesn't help me to dwell on it, and I just don't really have the motivation or the drive to really to work on my voice like a lot of people do, or like I could,
Hmm.
because I'm happy with my voice. It's fine.
Okay. Cranking through these. What were the biggest hurdles you ran into in your transition then?
The biggest hurdles were probably one of the surgeries that I've gotten. It took me a little while to get it approved through insurance, but there hasn't really been any super big hurdles for that. It was just a lot of paperwork, a lot of insurance denials, a lot of educating some providers here in North Alabama that hey, this person wants this surgery. It's not it's an elective for them, but yeah.
Hmm. Of hormones or surgeries or anything else that you've accomplished in your transition, what would you say was the single most affirming thing for you? What's the thing that made you feel the most like, oh, okay, now I feel like me. I feel like a woman, and this is great.
For me personally, it was really just my breast augmentation. I mean, I felt great the whole 3 or 4 years of HRT up until that point, and I knew that I needed to wait several years on HRT to really see what that would give me as far as breast growth. But after a couple of years of nothing really happening, I said, all right, I got to do something about this, and that surgery has been the best thing for me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's wonderful how different it is for everybody.
Yeah,
Which of
everybody has
the
their
things that
own.
set that up? Yeah.
HRT was great. I mean, I think within a week, I mean, I could really start feeling like a difference. It was kind of like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and that's hard to underestimate. Not underestimate. That's not the word, but that's hard to put into words how much that means until you actually go through it.
Hmm.
When you start having the actual body chemistry that your brain is telling you should have.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that the breast augmentation was the thing that did it for you. Did that affect how other people looked at you? You felt?
I don't think so because the breast augmentation was, in the grand scheme of things, was fairly recent for me. It only happened 4 months ago. So I mean, I'd already been out. I mean, it's everybody had already seen me as the woman I am, but that was just kind of like my own personal affirming thing to do for me.
Hmm.
I didn't have any. Everybody was always great to me. Everybody at work, all my friends and family. So that was 100% for me to do that surgery.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, the kind of treat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. What were some of the biggest learning curves that you've had in your transition? Things that were tough for you to learn or tough for you to get used to?
The thing probably toughest for me to get used to is realizing how much cis men typically don't value the opinion of women when you're in big groups. It's hard to describe what I mean by that, but anybody who's been through transition can kind of know what I'm talking about. If you're in a group, if you were in a group of men beforehand, your ideas and everything, there's a lot of weights put behind them. But all of a sudden, if you're a woman and you're given that exact same idea, it's dismissed a little easier, I think.
Hmm.
So sometimes you have to fight to make your voice heard just a little bit, and then you can kind of come across as a bitch. But you have to do that just to kind of get your ideas out there.
I
That's
loved
kind
what
of the biggest thing.
Yeah, I loved how Becky Heineman put that. She said that she ran into that same thing, that she was acting in the same manner that some of her male colleagues were, and they were deemed as being assertive and powerful men in their jobs, and she was doing that, and they were looking at her as a bitch. But
Exactly.
her take on that was, well, bitches get shit done.
Yeah. Yeah. That was it. That's the biggest thing that I've had to come to grips with.
Hmm.
And it took a little while for me to build that muscle because I wasn't used to that. But I've got it now. I've got that part of my life now.
Hmm. Have you ever experienced a thing that a lot of girls will talk about where you'll say an idea in a meeting and it'll just kind of float out there and nobody really say anything, and then somebody else a few minutes later will say the same idea and then everybody jumps on it? It's like, oh, that's a great idea.
I have.
Wow.
It doesn't happen at work as much as it probably would another job, but I have had it happen.
Hmm. Ah, the stuff to look forward to as we transition. Great, great. How do you feel overall that that transition has affected your mental health? For a lot of women, it's this wonderful weight lifted off, and it's this big change. It sounds like you were already tough, and you knew what you needed. Did it have much of a change there?
It did. I mean, even if I was tough or knew what I needed, I still had that turmoil going on inside of me, whether or not I expressed it physically or not. It was still there. So it's all that has basically dropped. All the weight's been lifted.
Hmm.
Transition, obviously doesn't fix everything. I mean, I still got a million other issues going on in life, just like any other person does. But transition just takes one thing off the table. I don't have to worry about that anymore. Now we got to
Mm-hmm.
worry about these other million things that's going on in life. But at least that's not one of them.
Oh, that's great. So then, following up on that, how has transitioning lived up to your expectations, or in what ways has it fallen short of that?
It's lived up to my expectations because I fully expected to, or I hoped to really feel at home in my own body finally. So that has 100% lived up to its expectations for me. Nothing's really fallen short as far as I'm concerned,
Okay.
but everything else, I mean, it's spot on. Everything's up to my expectations.
Mm-hmm. Getting a comment in the chat that my hair, I've got the surfer chick hair going tonight, which is an interesting comment. And then, of course, Madison claims that your hair is absolute fire, though, tonight. Which,
Nice. I got the blonde going tonight.
mm-hmm. Is that a dye?
It is, or bleach,
A
but
bleach? Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yep. My hair is pretty dark naturally. Like if you probably went on my Instagram page and go back several years, you can see that it's quite dark.
Mm-hmm. Is it pretty similar to
Probably
my natural color?
it's pretty close.
Mm.
It's maybe not as dark, but it's pretty close.
When I was younger, I kept trying to dye my hair. I wanted it to bleach it and dye it red. And every time I would bleach it, it gets this, because it's so dark, it gets this
Hmm.
crazy bright orange color that
Hmm.
I kept stopping on. I'm just like, that's pretty awesome. And I didn't want to go further with the bleach because I was worried what it would do to the hair, so I just left it at
Hmm.
this fiery orange. People would be surprised about the fire aspect of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean the bleach will damage your hair. I mean it's a damaging process no matter what. So you really just gotta find somebody who's gonna minimize that damage to the best of their ability.
Hmm. So, as we get to the end here, I've got my fun question, and well, obviously, because we've already interviewed, I know the answer to this one, but it's how did you choose your name? And I'll let you talk about that.
Well, I didn't actually choose my name. My parents chose my name for me, luckily enough, when I was born. So I've always been Jamie. My middle name has always been Lee, but I did have to change the spelling of my middle name due to the odd wording of the Alabama statute, because it states that to change your birth certificate, you also have to change your name. It's basically a name and gender change document. So I had to change something of my name just for my birth certificate to be changed, which was, kind of odd to me. But I
Yeah.
just changed my name from Lee to Lee. It was Lee,
Hmm.
and now it's Leigh. It's the same name no matter what. Luckily, but I didn't have to memorize anything, and I don't really get dead names. So
Yeah. That kind of, yeah, eliminates that.
I mean, I
Did
might be getting dead name, but I don't know if I don't know if I am or not.
did you did you have to go through did you go through and change all of your documentation then, or in some cases you're like, that one's not, I don't need to change it because it's so close?
I've had to change everything just because I don't want there to be any of the old spelling out there. Not
Hmm.
that I care if anybody sees the spelling. I don't want there to be issues if I'm applying for a loan or something like that, and be like, well, you might not be the same person.
Hmm.
I have found that not most places, but some places that I contact about changing my name over, most of them basically tell me, they didn't even know my middle name anyway. They just have my middle initial. So they're like, I don't think we ever knew your middle name. It just says Jamie L. And I said, all right, we're good. I don't have to change anything.
Nice. Cutting that one out makes it
Mm-hmm.
easy. Again, half of your work was done in your process. That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. So that's interesting. How did you choose or why did you choose the Instagram name of Justifiably, Jamie?
Uh, I just liked, I don't know what the term is. I used to know the term, but there's a
The
term for,
alliteration?
yep, that's it.
Mhm.
I like the alliteration of it just because I think I'd seen, Suddenly Samantha. There was a couple other ones that were similar. They would just use the
Yeah.
first letter of their name and then come up with some other name. So that's kind of how I did it, and it stuck.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like it's like, we've got several in the community as well, embracing Tiffany, and now I'm kind of blanking on some of the others.
Yeah.
But it was kind of funny when I realized that, yeah, you didn't have to change your name, and yet you still have one of those names that suggests that you're accepting this new identity, and you're justifying it. You're justifiably Jamie, and it's just like,
Hmm.
it's interesting because you always were Jamie.
Hmm. It's fine though. Justifiably, Jamie Lee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah, just Jess. That's right. This is the month of justs. Usually it's a month of firsts, but this is a month of justs. We had just Jess, and now we have justifiably Jamie.
And then we got mainly Madison. There's a couple other ones that do it. So yeah.
So as we wrap this part of the show up, what advice do you have for young and closeted transgender people out there?
I would say if you're going to transition, uh, do it for yourself. Don't do it for anybody else. Don't do it for your friends, your family, anything like that. If you're going to do it, it needs to be your decision, and you need to own that decision and just do everything for your own happiness.
Mhm. All right, everybody. I'm not gonna belabor this anymore. Jamie, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for going off into these different tangents.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And everybody here in chat, thank you so much for all your questions and your comments. I hope that you enjoyed the show. I hope you liked getting to see more about Jamie and hearing more about her story, hearing my little comments, and I hope you got a lot out of what we shared. You can always follow us on Instagram. I have the Transgender Show on Instagram, and Emily would go. Jamie is, of course, at Justifiably Jamie. The the Discord is a great place to find us. I can put that in the chat again as we're closing up here. But find support, find your friends, and come say hi. I will see you next week. We've got a fun guest next week. It's Phoenix, also known as Elijah. He is a I think he's a self-proclaimed trans baby, someone who's very new in their transition. But it's nice to get the trans male perspective on, and they're like I said, they're super new in their transition, so it'll be very fun to get their perspective. Thank you all, and have a great night.